Have you started trying to learn a foreign language and struggled to speak in the beginning? You're trying to remember the new vocabulary or maybe some grammar rules, and you're trying to form this sentence in your head. And then you say that sentence to a native speaker, and then worst of all, they say something back to you and you have no idea what they've just said. I know the feeling. Stick around because I'm going to talk about a really interesting way to learn a foreign language. I'm going to talk about my experience with crosstalk. Crosstalk is a method of having a one-on-one conversation with a native speaker. Now, during that conversation, you're going to get lots of relevant input that you find engaging. The key thing when learning any foreign language is getting input. It's not about producing the language, which is output. We want to get the language into us. We don't yet know that language, so we have to get lots of input, and this is a perfect method to do that. So is it like a normal language exchange? No, quite simply. In a language exchange, I'll find someone who, I'm learning Spanish, I'll find a Spanish speaker who wants to learn English. In that exchange, we spend the first half an hour only talking in Spanish, both of us just talking in Spanish back and forth. And then the next half an hour in that hour session, I'm talking in English, they're talking back to me in English, so we each get half an hour on our target language. So you really only get half an hour worth of input during that period of time. In crosstalk, my tutor or exchange partner only talks to me in their native language, and I only respond in my native language, so that we're having a conversation, but each of us is using a different language. It might sound really odd, but it works so well, and it's been a complete game changer for me. And you can use this even from the beginner level. Now, I'll explain how this works for beginners in a moment, because of course it does take time to build your understanding, like anything. That's hopefully one of the reasons you're trying to learn a foreign language, so you can understand it. Quite early on, when we're learning a foreign language, we're already trying to speak, we're already trying to produce that foreign language. And so this takes a different approach. All I have to worry about is understanding the person I'm talking to. I'm just having a conversation. I'm not thinking about my grammar. Are we talking the past tense? Spanish grammar and conjugation? I'm not worrying about any of that. I'm just having a really interesting conversation with my tutor. I'm building up my understanding and naturally getting a feeling for the grammar. What will you do at the end of the 4 months? You'll just go back to your university, or?
No, yo ya terminé con la universidad.
Oh, okay. And so at no stage am I worrying about my output. I'm just focusing on the input that I'm getting. And first of all, you're aware you're talking in this foreign language, but after a while, and once you start to build up more confidence, I forget that we're having this conversation between two languages. I'm just having a really interesting conversation, which is fantastic. And if we can make language learning enjoyable, then we're going to succeed, because it's something we like to do, and it's inevitable. If you get enough exposure to the language, you'll slowly build up your level of fluency. If we make it a hard slog, then it's going to be a long old road to get there. So try and make it as enjoyable as possible. For context, when I was learning Chinese, genuinely after about an hour's lesson, I would feel like I would almost have a headache. And it's because I was trying to produce the language at the same time I was trying to learn and understand it. And my brain was trying to do these various tasks, which were quite tiring for it. It was working at such a rate. Not only was I trying to understand what was being said to me, but I'm trying to remember the vocabulary that I'm trying to say. Most importantly, with production, with Chinese, I was trying to remember the tones. So in Chinese, the way you say a word, the intonation of that word changes the meaning. And so, first I was trying to not say anything too offensive, but I was trying to make sure that I got my tones correct. And I'm so focused on what I'm doing, and then I'm trying to understand what the speaker's saying to me. So there'll be times where I'm thinking about the next sentence I'm going to say, and I've not focused so much on what my teacher's said, and I've missed bits of what they've said, and then I'm a few seconds behind and playing catch up during that conversation. It can be so tiring. Crosstalk, none of that. In crosstalk, I'm just having a nice time. I'm just talking to my teacher and I'm focusing on comprehension. Now, there'll be times, of course, where I don't understand what's going on because I'm not a fluent speaker yet. And so there will be times when I don't understand and I do have to say, oh, what's that?
¿Sabes lo que es el bono?
No.
El bono es como cuando tú pagas por el transporte público, tú puedes pagar viajes sueltos o puedes pagar una tarjeta con un pago mensual y tú viajas todo lo que quieras.
Oh, okay, right. Now, sometimes Adana, my tutor, will say it in English, which technically isn't correct with the crosstalk method. I should ask in English and then it should get explained back to me in the target language. I understand when people are talking around a subject now, not just going, that's the word for it. Oh, I don't understand that word. Oh, it's when this and this and this. And it's not only about input. At some stage, eventually, you can start talking when you're ready. But people talk about the silent period. There's variation and debate on how long that period should be. But ultimately, you can talk when you're ready, but I'm not talking yet because I don't want to reinforce poor grammar, poor vocabulary and things like that, poor pronunciation. I'm just taking my time. There's no rush for me to speak. I don't live in a Spanish speaking country, so I can just enjoy the journey. And it's such a relief to be able to enjoy these lessons, which are fantastic, and still get input, still get fantastic input, and not get the headache that I used to get before. When I previously did some online Spanish lessons, the teacher, whatever, we'd start talking. I was going to jump in, I was going to start talking Spanish very early because I've got to learn this language and ultimately I'm going to make mistakes, but I'll give it a go. Quite quickly in a conversation, the teacher would then correct me and say, oh, you've made a mistake. That's not how we say this. The grammar is whatever the particular grammar rule was. And invariably, I would try and understand what they were saying and I wouldn't understand it because I don't yet know Spanish. We'd try and go back to the conversation and they would then quite quickly make the same correction and tell me, I've just corrected you. It's that same rule, which is this. And it just sucked all the joy out of the conversation. It got to the stage where it was a lesson that I am being taught, as opposed to just a fun way to learn a foreign language and just talk to someone naturally. Children don't learn a foreign language by studying all the rules and the list of vocabulary first and then start talking. They just pick it up. And I personally prefer to do it that way. Ultimately, when you're learning a foreign language, do what you enjoy. You might try this and go, that bloke on the internet, I thought it was rubbish. If you don't like it, that's fine, you've tried it, do something else. But for me, the grammar rules sometimes suck the joy out of learning a foreign language, which is an innately joyful process. You just have to make sure you keep it fun. Now, for beginners, the issue with this method is you don't yet know the foreign language, of course. So your level of comprehension isn't high enough in order to understand the person when they're talking to you. And in order to use this method, if you're going to start it from early on in your learning, you need to have some kind of visual cue. So that might be a whiteboard to draw on, or if it's much easier, just a piece of paper, like a notepad that you can draw on and make it obvious that, you know, what the thing is you're talking about. It depends on the level of English of the person who you're doing it with, but it might well be that if they understand your English, you don't have to do so much drawing. But if you are a beginner in that foreign language, they will have to do enough drawing for you to understand, be it drawing on the screen if it's online. Now, of course, if you're going to do this, it is a little bit harder to use those visual cues. You might want to delay the start of using this as a method. So it's down to you when you want to employ it. It might be easier from the early stages to do it face to face with someone. Have a notepad between you, a biro each, and just sort of scribble on the notepad, or you can act things out, make noises, whatever, so that it becomes a more natural conversation. Now, one thing that I didn't think I'd experience as an issue was one of the tutors I approached online refused to use this as a method in our classes. I suggested it, he seemed like a fun person from his video on italki, and he said that he didn't want to use it as a method. He had a particular way he liked to run a lesson, and he said that he didn't want to try crosstalk. Of course, I'd searched for a tutor who had listed English on italki as a language they were fluent in. So I thought, if I'm going to pay a tutor for this, I'm not there to teach them English. I want someone I can just talk English to, and I'm at a level where hopefully they can just talk back to me, but maybe slow it down or explain some stuff. And he just point to blank refused. And I tried to get across the idea that it will help your English as well. I will explain things to you in English and talk around subjects so that you understand them in the same way that I am. So in a way, it's giving them a free English lesson that they're getting paid for. But not everybody is up for that. So just bear that in mind. It is worth contacting whichever tutor you want to try it with first and then see what they say, as opposed to just book it and turn up at lesson 1 and go, oh no, by the way, I'm going to talk in English. Good luck. Of course, not everyone wants to try that as a method. For me, I prefer to employ a tutor online so that I can find someone who's interesting and hopefully have some interesting conversations. But you could do it as a language exchange. Find a language exchange partner either in the real world, if you live in a city that's fairly multicultural, you might be able to find somewhere. One option would be to go onto Twitter and use the LangTweet hashtag, find an exchange partner and do it there. And so you could just try it as a method online. So please try and give Crosstalk a go. If you try it and you don't like it, you tried it, nothing lost. You know it's something that you've tried and it wasn't for you. That's okay. But for me, it was an absolute game changer and something I'm going to use again and again. So it's definitely, in my opinion, worth a go. I hope you found this video useful. I'll see you in the next one.